see the enthusiasm and energy that NCUC members have for their work. Thanks, Wolfgang. I thought I'd take a slightly different tack and just talk about why APC is engaged in NCUC and some of the ways we've brought forward issues of concern to our network through the GNSO path and through our engagement with NCUC. So, I mean, APC does participate in ICANN in the non-commercial user constituency and has really for a long time, before me, Karen Banks and others. And our overall, we decided to come up with a strategy for that engagement. We're not just there for the sake of being present. We have some quite clear objectives around why we're engaged. And they're essentially threefold. The first is to join the dots on our advocacy across the internet governance ecosystem. Given that so much tension in other spaces in internet governance centres or has in the past centred around the role of coordinating critical internet resources that ICANN plays, it makes sense for us to be in that space, finding out what's going on and understanding how it's really working. The other thing is we want to basically strengthen and improve ICANN's public policy making role. If they're going to be making public policy in ICANN that affects rights, affects developing countries, we want it to be good as it can be with the resources we've got to commit to it. And thirdly, we actually want to support NCUC as a civil society space within ICANN and to strengthen the work of APC members who are there and other civil society groups, especially from the Global South. So it's really clear that's what the strategy is. And it is a very interesting time to be involved in ICANN generally. There's a lot of pressure on the ICANN role from outside, including from governments and the private sector. And almost as many are concerned to see that ICANN is effective as are concerned to see that it's not effective. And so you see a lot of positioning and rhetoric around that, and I think it's good to be involved and make up your own mind about what you see and hear. And the space is quite unique. I mean, sometimes I despair that so much resource and so much funding is going into such a tiny part of the internet governance system, which is the naming, and increasingly it's already only the naming part of it. And I see, the multi-million-dollar, resources that are available to ICANN for this. But having said that, that's not a reason not to be involved. I just want to talk about some of the issues that we've been involved, that I particularly have been involved in since I became a GNSO counsellor in October 2011. And bearing in mind my first foray into ICANN was not through the non-commercial user constituency, but through the country code top-level domain .nz, because I'm a member of .nz and also on the board of their regulator. So for me, coming into the NCUC and GNSO space, it was quite different. Probably one of the first issues that I was involved in commenting on was the submissions on financial assistance to new GTLD applicants from developing countries. And you talked a little bit about that with Avri Doria. The fee was $185,000 to apply for a new generic top-level domain, and there's a lot of pressure and submissions on reducing that for developing countries. So we made submissions saying that we supported the reduction of those fees, but actually we wanted more from that. We wanted support for registries and registrars in developing countries, financial assistance to improve the technical operations of those registries, many of which were still under monopoly systems, some with government, some private sector, to support increased competition and reduce costs for users. So just a really clear, simple way to try and support that process. Another specific area was on NCUC developed an issues paper on new generic top-level domains and human rights. Basically saying, look, ICANN is not a human rights making body. Its role is not to create new human rights norms or standards in its coordination role. Its job instead is to take existing human rights standards into account in the public policy work that it's doing and make sure that its public policy decisions are human rights compliant. So we looked, for example, at new GTLDs and focused on the principles that should apply around free expression, and that any limitations on freedom of expression had to comply with existing international rights standards. So, for example, Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which we talked about this morning. We argue strongly to support community applications. So where you've got applications not from private sector or businesses, say for example in relation to .gay, where there are a number of multiple applications for .gay as a GTLD, we see priority should be given to the communities which are putting forward those applications. So there is a community application for .gay, for example. We talked about balancing human rights concerns because, where there are multiple and conflicting rights, priority should be given to protecting marginalised groups. So rather than trademark owners and intellectual property rights concerns, community concerns, cultural concerns should be given priority. And also that in relation to the GAC advice, we were saying, look, GAC members do not speak for civil society. They should be making sure that, if they're there representing the views of Egypt or Turkey or Uruguay, that they've spoken to civil society in those countries, they've connected with internet governance processes, and they're actually representing diverse views. And often those views that GAC members put forward are never consulted with publicly in the countries locally. So, and we were able to, release our own issues paper, have engaged conversations with board members about that, and say, we're going to be watching your decisions for compliance with these standards. We focused in particular also on suggesting there be human rights impact assessments of new of public policy processes. So, what are the likely impacts on free expression or privacy from, for example, the WHOIS review or from privacy related proposals? We also wrote a letter to privacy commissioners when we were concerned about the WHOIS recommendations, asking for them to please pay attention to these issues and to bring their privacy expertise to bear, because in fact there's really no privacy experts in the, there's only one privacy expert on the new working group, and she's a former privacy commissioner from Canada. So we wrote letters of concern, and we had civil society, for example, I think Derechos Digitales from Chile wrote in support of, wrote to the board of ICANN in support of these privacy concerns and civil society perspectives. So there are a number of examples, there are other examples I can use about how we've tried to bring forward these concerns, and very clearly trying to link what's going on in other internet governance spaces with this very specific narrow mandate that ICANN has to coordinate public policy issues. Wolfgang and others have talked about how sometimes that's successful, sometimes it isn't, but very much one of our strategies in NCUC has been to make visible the debates outside public policy making processes. So in Beijing, for example, we had a side event on policy issues related to new GTLDs to bubble up and allow some space outside formal meeting processes for free expression. So those are just some examples. I'm happy to share others and take questions, but also want to give David Cake a chance to talk about some other issues.